Hello, welcome to the second part of the creation of our accounting system in MS Excel. If you are here, it means you've surely watched the previous video. If you've not watched the previous video, then I would advise you to watch the previous video or the part one of the creation of accounting system. However, I'm going to drop the link in the description. In this video today, we are going to see how to make the accounting entries. Already in the previous video, we made the setup of our journal. We created our accounting plan, and also we had to work on our settings page. Today, I just want to show you how I made my own accounting entries, and from here we will follow or we will step forward with the creation of the ledger account. Already, these are the transactions. The first transaction there represents the transaction on January where we had purchased inventory 15 million and paid 7 million by cash and the remaining on credit. So this is a transaction. I just had to debit the purchase of goods account by 15 million, the supplier's account and then the cash account by 7 million, suppliers 8 million because there was a sales on credit for 8 million and the cash was paid 7 million. Next transaction is sold goods for 20 million and paid 10 million. So this is it. Sales of goods, we credit the sales of goods account to the debit of cash 10 million and the customer who is owing us also 10 million. The next transaction is paid salaries for 2 million. Okay, so here we have paid salaries. However, the dates were not given, so I just allowed it empty, or I just made it to be understood that all the transactions which are recorded here are the transactions of January. Here we have paid salaries. Okay, we debit the account for salaries and credit the account number for cash. So how have I been doing that? I've just been selecting the account number from the database for the accounting plan, and here the account number will automatically appear. The account name will automatically appear. Then manually I'll enter the amount. Here I can put some description or some comments on the specific transaction. Next transaction, we have purchase equipment costing 5 million. Purchase equipment, so we will have to debit the equipment account. And here there is a mistake. I'm supposed to put 5 million. And okay, 3 million was paid by cash according to the transaction. 3 million was paid by cash and the rest was financed. So 3 million was paid by cash and the remaining goes to an account prepared for suppliers of a tangible fixed asset, so that the day we will definitely pay the suppliers, we will then debit this account to the credit of the means of payment. So those are the transactions for January. February, we had received 8 million from a customer on account. Already we sold goods to a customer and he's owing us 10 million. So in the month of February, he is going to give us 8 million, so we are going to credit the customer by 8 million. Or yeah, I'm just using general account numbers. I've not specified the third party's account, so as a result I'm just using the general account number for customers and the general account number for suppliers, because here we are paying suppliers by 12 million, the second transaction for February, paying the suppliers for 12 million. So we will just debit the suppliers account against the credit of the cash account since we paid by cash. Next transaction, we had depreciation of equipment 500,000. So yeah, we will debit the expense on depreciation and credit the depreciation of the equipment, the depreciation account for the equipment in question, all by 500,000. Yeah, I could be putting comments. Next transaction, we have recorded interest income of 200,000. So we will have to record the interest. Yeah, so we receive interest of 200,000 and we credit the account number for interest received from loans. And here we have a match, sold inventory for 12 million. So we sold goods for 12 million. As a result, here sold good for 12 million. So we will then credit sales of goods by 12 million. 6 million was paid by cash and the 6 million will rely on the customer's account. Okay, I think this is the second sales transaction. The first sales transaction was 20 million. This is the second sales transaction for 12 million. Okay, next transaction we have yeah, received dividend. Okay, received dividend from investment for 300,000. So yeah, we will where is it? We will debit the account for cash since we received the dividend by cash and credit the dividend account. The next one is pay taxes for 5 million. So here we will debit the state tax account, and then we will credit the means of payment, which was cash. Then there is also recorded insurance for 1 million. So there is insurance, recorded insurance for 1 million. Oh, recorded insurance for 1 million means we paid for insurance expense for 1 million. And already the insurance, if we check on the exercise, there was opening balances, and according to the opening balances, there was prepaid insurance as at the beginning of the period. As at the beginning of January, there was prepaid insurance of 3 million. Means the insurance was already paid and it is now on account. So here, if they say in the month of March recorded insurance for 3 million, it definitely means that for 1 million, sorry, it definitely means that insurance expense has been acknowledged for the month of March just by 1 million. So we will then debit the expense account and reduce the prepaid insurance account, which was there as opening balance. So there is no cash transaction again because the insurance was already paid. So now in terms of adjustments, we have accrued salaries payable. So by the month of March, we are owing salaries worth 1,500,000. So here we will then acknowledge the expense on salaries for 1,500,000 and send it to the liability account for personnel wages and accrued salaries for 1.5 million. What other adjustment is there? Prepaid insurance remaining at March is 1 million. Okay, as opening balance of prepaid insurance, it was 3 million, and now in the month of March they are telling us that there is a remaining insurance of 1 million. It means that there's a remaining prepaid insurance of 1 million. It definitely means that insurance has been consumed by 2 millions, but here we recorded only prepaid, we recorded only insurance expense for the month of March. It definitely means that somehow the month of February, or might be the month of February, or might be the month of January, there was no recording of the prepaid insurance. So what we will do is that we will just make in such a way that the account for prepaid insurance should have a balance of 1 million, and it had an opening stock of it had an opening balance, sorry, of 3 million. If it has an ending balance of 1 million, it means that 2 million has been consumed, and we have already recorded part of it in the month of March here, where we recorded prepaid insurance by 1 million. It means that we need to adjust again. How much? We need to adjust again 1 million only. So I'll get here. I will then acknowledge. I don't know. I'm just going to make it as an adjustment entry for the month of March. I'm just going to make an adjustment entry to acknowledge again the expense incurred on the insurance, and reduce the account number for prepaid insurance. So I'm not going to do it twice again because it was already acknowledged for the first time. So I'm going to delete this transaction because previously I recorded it twice, thinking that forgetting that I had already recorded for the month of March. So I'm going to delete this, delete the shift up. Okay, so if we debit the account number for insurance expense and credit again 4744 for prepaid insurance, 476 for prepaid insurance, it will further reduce the insurance account by 1 million, and it was already reduced by 1 million again. So it definitely means that the balance, when we will draw our ledger account or our trial balance, we'll see the balance of this account being 1 million. So that's the adjustment entry we had to make. So from here, which other adjustment is there? Inventory on hand as at 31st. Okay, here is the balance of inventory as at the 31st. Balance of inventory as at the 31st of March is 18 million. So here I've just made a quick calculation. From the opening balances, we had inventory being 20 million as opening stock. So if the opening stock is 20 million, in terms of purchases, looking at all these transactions, there was only this purchase by 15 million. So opening stock plus purchases will give us the stock of goods available, and the stock of goods available here is 35 million. So actually the system, if we are given the inventory balance at the end of the period, it definitely means that we are using, or we are working in terms of the periodic inventory management system. And as a result, with this inventory management system, it is only at the end of the period that we vary the stock situation. And for us to vary the stock situation, we need to know the cost of goods sold, the cost of goods that we have actually sold. And for us to get the cost of goods sold, we take the opening stock plus purchases minus the closing stock, which is 18 million. It definitely means that the cost of goods sold is 17 million. So we have sold twice. We have sold a year for 20 million and a year again for 12 million. For 12 million. Where is it? I think it's in the month of March for 12 million. So we've sold in total for 32 million, but the cost of the goods sold, because the 32 million represent the prices at which we sold. So the cost of goods sold here is 17 million. As a result, we need to make some adjustment entries so that at the end of the period, we should acknowledge the closing stock of goods, which is 18 million. And for us to do that, we can simply make variation in stock of goods when goods were purchased and variation in stock of goods when goods were sold. So here, um, we will just make two accounting entries for all purchases and for all sales. We had total purchases of 15 million. When we purchase goods, to vary our stock of goods, we have to debit the account number for stock and the credit the variation in stock account. So here, as at the end of the month, I'll just debit the stock account to the credit of the variation in stock of goods by 15 million, since the total purchases during the period was 15 million. And in terms of all the sales, the total cost of goods sold for the period year represents 17 million. So I'll also, when we sell goods, the variation of stock of goods is debited and the stock itself is exited from the warehouse by being credited. So I'll just make these accounting entries in order to make the inventory adjustment. However, it is in our trial balance or in our ledger account that we will be able to know that the stock of goods is left out with 18 million, because we should have at the end of the period the stock of goods at the end of the period, or the closing stock of goods, being 18 million, and these accounting entries will actually help us get that at the end of the period. So that is how I just recorded the transactions. You could do same, put the comments and so on. Now, after recording the transactions, we need to get the ledger account. So I'm just going to create a new worksheet. I'm going to call it ledger. Now, at the level of ledger, we can make it in the form of T accounts, means we make something like this. If I just can just put some column, meaning we can make it something like this. But this T account will have to be for every single account. It means we'll draw this as many times as we have accounts. It means if we have a 1,000 account numbers, we will have to draw this T account for each of them. But it's going to be too stressful doing it that way. So we can just simply put it in the form of a table. And we can also making it in the form of a table will summarize all the movements and summarize all the debit movements and all the credit movements. In that way, we can be able to have the balances of every account. But before that, we should remember that they were opening balances, and these opening balances were not made in the form of accounting entries, of which this ledger is going to be looking up to the journal in order to make or in order to generate the ledger. Hadn't been the opening balances, I recorded the opening balance at the level of the journal and might be mentioned at the level of the comment that they are opening balances. It could have been much more easy. But in this case, I think we will be creating the ledger, because the ledger account does not only focus on the movements, but also takes into consideration the opening balances of every account. As a result, in making this, I should integrate at the same time the opening balances and the movements from the journals. In that case, I can just readjust or create a worksheet where we have opening balances, or I can just use this very same table the way it is and work things out. So it all depends. I can just create another opening balance on another journal, another worksheet where I'm going to impute the opening balances. Let me just use this table the way it is here. So in your own case, you could create a new worksheet, for example, and call it opening balance. Call it opening balances, and from here you can make a table which will have the opening balance of every account. Let me go through this. We have already our accounting plan. So the accounting plan can just help us directly. Okay, I could just use the accounting plan and call for the opening balances. So how could I do that? So I could just come here at the level of the accounting plan and talk about opening balances. And from here, I could use a function which will be able to identify the opening balance of every account from this opening balance. But in that case, we will need the debited opening balance and credited opening balance. So I can just come here to the accounting plan, put opening balance debit and opening balance credit. Let me do it in some other ways. I will not want to saturate my accounting plan with all of this. So I'm just going to do it at the level of the opening balance worksheet. So in here, I'm just going to call this, I'm going to arrange the header letter, opening balance. And here, I'm going to call for the account numbers, or I'm going to call for the very same accounting plan here. And I will make it so much dynamic that each time an account number is created in the chart of account, the opening balance worksheet should be aware of the creation of the account number. So how do I go about it? First thing, I check where the table for the account numbers in the chart of accounts that they start in B2 or they start in row 2. So I'll make sure that here at the level of the opening balance, I'm also going to have the headers. I can have these very same headers. I can have these very same headers. I'm just going to copy the headers, then put them here. Let me just expand it. Okay, so I'm just going to make this be in a table. So I come to insert, I insert a table. No, my table starts from B2. I will say from B2, and I'll add it to F3, for example, or F10. This is where I specify the size of my table. So I'm saying my table has headers and I take okay. So that's the table. So I'll come in this cell and I'll say let this cell be equal to what is at the level of the accounting plan here, so that anything that is in that cell will always be in this cell. So I'm just going to expand this table. I'm just going to expand this table to be as long as possible so that it should always be responding according to whatsoever is happening at the level of the chart of account. So I've just made a reflection that let this cell be equal to the cell that is located in here, the content of the cell that is located here. So in this case, you see when there is no account number downward, it will show an error message. So here I'm just going to use the if error function in order to make it not show the error message again. So I'm just going to say if error. If there is an error, I will say do nothing in here. So I'm not deleting the content of the cell, I'm just adding the if error function. So from there, if there is an error, you will see nothing will appear there. And at the same time, I will make in such a way that this table should just be normal, like just very normal. I can just make the table like this. I can just come to view and remove grid lines, and I'm good to go. I'm going to do same with the account name so that it should always look up to whatsoever is in here. And I'm going to put the if error function, or I could just autofill too. I could just autofill. I could just autofill like this and take it this way. Good. So these cells are just going to be looking up to the chart of account. I've just made a kind of duplicate of the chart of account, but looking up to the chart of account itself. It means that the day that this cell, for example, is showing something else, like for example, let me say 4421, for example, if it shows this account, you will see at the level of the opening balance, it will now show the same thing because this cell is looking up to that cell. So I'm just going to take it back the way it is. It was just like this. So now actually what I need here is the opening balances in terms of the debit and in terms of the credit. We might be using these later on, but all these cells I don't really need them, so I'm going to hide them later. I'm just going to put here a debit and credit. Okay, so in here, I want the debit amount of the opening balances to appear and the credit amount of the opening balance to appear. As a result, I'm going to use the VLOOKUP function. But before using the VLOOKUP function, I'm going to put the if error function so that in case of eventual error message, it should show nothing. So VLOOKUP, what am I looking up to? I'm looking up to the account number. In which table array? This is the table array where I am looking for the account number. I'm looking for it in this table. I'm just going to make it be fixed. Like I'm going to put dollar signs in front and behind of the cell reference so that it should not be moving because this table is just as it is. So the column index number, I need what is in column 1, 2, 3. Since we're on the debit side, I need what is in column 3. And I need an exact match, so I'm going to put 0 and the close bracket, then put the value if error. The value if error will just be nothing. And I take this, so you can see when I use that function, each time it sees an account in that table, it's going to give the opening balance. The same way, I'm going to use the same function in here. I'm just going to enter in this one, copy, then take the escape key, go to the next cell, put the equals to sign, and paste the same function. But this time around, I need information which is located in column 4. So I take the tab key. From there, we will have the opening balances of every account in another workbook. We will later on work in this in this page, because with time, what will happen is that we will have some new opening balances at the end of the period, or the closing balances will become opening balances for the next operating period. So when we get there, we will see how to adjust it so that it should no more be looking up to what is here, but what is in the closing balances. So, but for now, this is actually what we need. This is what we need. So, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all the accounts are there. So I'm now going to work on my ledger account. So I'm going to remove these borders. No border. So from here, I need to create a table which will summarize all the transactions both in the journal and also at the level of the at the level of the opening balance exactly. So in this case, I will need what will I need exactly? I will need I will need I will need the account type, no, or I will need the account number. I think account number. Need the account number. I will need the account name. I will need what else? The debit. I will need the credit, and what else? And the balance. So now the ledger account is going to be an individual account, a table which will summarize individual accounts. And where are those individual accounts located? All those individuals accounts are located at the level of the accounting plan. We are actually talking about these account numbers. And what do we need at the level of the ledger? We need the movement, the total movements, and the balances of each of these accounts. So instead of me coming in the ledger, might be writing the account number, I'm just going to carry all the account numbers that exist at the level of our chart of account, so that each time there is an account in the chart of account, it should go and verify in the journal and see if in the journal that account has been debited or credited, and also check at the level of the opening balance whether there was a debit balance or a credit balance in the opening balance worksheet. As a result, I'll just do exactly the same thing I did for this opening balance. I will call for the different informations I will need, here I will come to the ledger. In terms of the account number, first of all, I'm going to put this in the table. So I come to insert, I say table, then my table has headers, but I'm going to make it such that my table goes right up to J 1000 or 1500 to provide for enough account numbers. I believe that we can have up to 1500 account numbers. So I'm just going to make it this way. Then I'm just going to remove these colors, just put it this way because I don't like too much of colors. So I'm just going to put here blue, and all this is now in a table. All this is in a table, just that the colors are not showing. I can just come here on view and remove the grid line, so it should just be like this. Or if I want, I could put something that will help me. Or before, later on, we can make conditional formatting on it for it to be much more better. So remember, I am standing in in row 3. I am standing in row 3 because the accounting plan also starts in row 3. I mean, the reflection, what I'm about to do here, to say, let this cell, let me start with if error, let this cell be equal to what is in the accounting plan in this cell. It won't work well if the first column, the first row in which I am doesn't correspond to the first row of our accounting plan. it is actually working, or it is actually seeing what is in here, because here we are in column 3, we are in row 3, and the year 2, let me close the function, and the year 2 we are in column 3, so you will see 101. If here we are putting this function in column, in column 6, it will just come here and will also see anything that is in column 6. And if our table is actually starting in column 6, the informations will not that be visible. So that is it. After I've done this, I also need the account names. I will just autofill so that the account name should also appear. Now, what do I need? I need I need to know the debited amount and the credited amount. But before that, I think I'll need some other informations. I think I'm going to insert another column here, because I'll need the account, the default account type, whether it is a debit, whether the account has a debit balance or a credit balance. You're soon going to see why I need that. So I'm just going to increase a new column in this table. I'm just going to right click and take insert a column, and I'm going to call it balance type. So let the balance type, okay, so this one is supposed to be balance type, balance type, and this one is supposed to be the debited amount. So for the balance type, I'll just continue. I'll just autofill. No, I will use the same function I've used here. Like, I'll just copy this, get here, paste it. But here we are looking up to what is in the account type. The account type is located here, the respective account type of this account number. So good. So we have the balance type, whether it is a debit balance or credit balance. Now here we need the amount that was debited and the amount that was credited. So it is in the trial balance that we're going to separate the total amount of the opening balances from those which were in the movements, from those which are the closing balances in terms of the debit and credit. But the trial or the ledger we are creating here will normally, a ledger is supposed to give the detail of all the transactions that took place with a specific account. But this table cannot actually specify, or cannot duplicate capital as many times as capital appeared in the journal, or 601, it will not be able to duplicate 601 as many times as it appeared in the journal. But we are going to look for some other ways to make that appear. I'm going to look for some other ways for it to appear. But for now, we just need to get the total debits and the total credits and the balance of each of these accounts, looking up to the journal and the opening balance. As a result, I'll come here for the debit. I'm going to say, I'm going to use, I need to sum all the amounts, right? So I'm going to use the sum if function. So I'm going to use the sum if function. Sum if function, how many conditions are there? There are about 2 conditions. So I will not use the sum if function, but I will use the sum ifs function, because there are 2 conditions. I'll be summing in case it sees the account number, and it might be the date. Okay, we can edit it later on, because what I'm about to do will work only for a lifetime purpose. Like, it will not be able to distinguish different dates, but as we will be going ahead, we will see how to add dates so that it can filter the total only for a specific year, different from another year. Because here it is going to sum all the transactions that were recorded in the journal, irrespective of the year. It means if you are recording transactions in a journal right up to 2025, 2026, this function will just give all the total, both for 2024, 2025, 2026. But later on, we are going to adjust it to work in terms of specific periods. So here, I'm just going to use the sum if function. In the sum if function, I'm going to take the range. The range here is going to be at the level of the journal. And for it to make it easy, let me stop it. For it to make it easy, I'll make my journal to be in the form of a table. So I'll make my journal look like a table. So I'm just going to select, might be from year right up to year, or let me just stand here. I'll come to insert, take a table. So I'm going to make it a table, but I'll make it start from column A4. I'm going to make it start from column A4 right up to J1000 whatsoever. So this is now in a table, but I will not like the colors that are there, so I'm just going to remove the colors. So it is just in the table because there are some facilities in terms of selecting the column now, which will be much more easier. So I come back to my ledger. I will say equals to sum if equals to sum if. So the range here is in the journal, and the range here is in terms of the account number. So sum if in the account numbers, we see what criteria? We see this account. If we see this account in the whole range of accounts at the level of the journal, what should it sum? It should sum, since we are on the debit side, it should sum the amounts that are on the debit side, like this. So sum if in this range we see that account, it should sum the amounts that are on the debit side. So from here, I close bracket, and you can see it is definitely going to sum or check at the level of the journal. Each time it sees an account that exists here, each time it sees an account in the journal, it will take it and keep on accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. Now, you will notice that it is looking only up to the journal, but I need it to look up to the journal and also up to the opening balance, meaning it should sum the amounts that are in the journal and also in the opening balance. So the function is already correct, but I'm also going to say plus, meaning it should do the total amount that is in the journal plus sum if again, sum if again. The range now is in terms of the opening balance. If it sees the account number here, which account number are we talking about? We are talking about this account number. And what should be the sum range? The sum range is in the opening balance, the amounts that are on the debit side. So it will do opening balance plus movements. So this is the function for the movements up to here, then plus the opening balance. So I press my enter key, and each time you will see an amount on an amount of, or each time we see this account either in the opening balance and in the journal, it is going to accumulate both amounts. The same way, we will do the same thing here at the level of the credit side, just that we will change the sum range to be the credit. So I'm just going to copy back all these functions that I entered on the debit side. So I'll get here, put equals to sign, paste the function, but here I'm going to move from debit. I'm going to move from debit to credit. From debit to credit. So and I press the enter key, and that is it. That is it. Exactly the way I wanted it to be. So you will see here there is 5 million, just because already at the level of the journal entries there is no account number for capital inside. But here you will see an amount for capital. Why? Because it has seen that amount at the level of the opening balance for 50 million. So here we now need to know the balance. To know the balance, we need to, because here, since this is a liability or this is an equity account, to get the balance here, we will have to do the credit side minus the debit side. And in this case, for example, of stock, to get the balance, we will have to do the debit side minus the credit side, meaning because it depends on the default type of account. All assets will be debit minus credit, and liabilities will be credit minus debit. So instead of me doing on the checking one by one which one we should do debit minus credit and which one is to do credit minus debit, which is going to be stressful to us, that is why I then had to bring up this column for the balance type, because any balance type that is credit balance, we should do credit minus debit. Anyone that is debit balance, we should do debit minus credit. So we're just going to use a conditional statement in order to make it debit, do debit minus credit or credit minus debit, depending on its nature of account. So that is why I called the balance type. As a result here, instead of me doing debit, instead of me coming here and saying equals to the credit minus the debit, which some of them will have negative values, because those who have the negative values are actually assets accounts, or might be expense accounts. I will then condition it instead. So instead of it being like this, I will say equals to if the balance type is equal to the credit balance, for example, or I can start with debit balance. If it's equals to, I'll put in code debit balances, because that's how I wrote it. If it's equal to debit balance, then if it's debit balance, it means if the type is debit balance, then it should do debit minus credit. So the value if true is debit, the debit side minus the credit side. Now the value if false, obviously if it is not debit balance, then it is obviously credit balance. So if it doesn't see that the cell for balance type has the debit balance, then we will just say credit minus debit, because in that case it is obvious that it is the credit balance. So we will just say at the level of the value if false, credit minus debit. And from here you will see there will be practically no problem there. You see it is doing the credit minus the debit and so on. So let me check on some accounts that are there. State salaries. Da, 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 da. This one is supposed to be an expense account. So here is state. There is an accounting entry problem here, and equally here where we have personnel wages. So this one is supposed to be a liability account. So it's at the level now of a chart of account. This account is supposed to be a liability account. Um, and it's supposed to have a credit balance good. It has a credit balance, but what is the issue? Yeah, it is instead showing debit balance 422 422. So it is not an expense account, it is a liability account. So immediately as I change it, you will see it will work properly. You will then do debit minus credit. So here it shows that we've paid suppliers more than we're supposed to pay actually. um okay, okay, so this is fine. I don't know if, for example, in the opening balance, then there was an account for suppliers. Okay, we're still owing suppliers, and here it shows that suppliers debt has just gone up to paid, but here it has not included everything. It's not included everything. So I'll just check on this in terms of a supplier, how much was credited at the level of the journal. So you see now it becomes complicated to interrogate individual account. It becomes complicated to interrogate individual account and to know exactly the different movements, because normally a ledger account is supposed to give all the detailed transactions of every account. So in order for us to remedy that and for us to actually check, because normally after doing this, we should find out if the total debit is equal to the total credit and to know whether this is actually balancing. So already I'll start by getting some totals just here at the top to see whether at the level of the movements I never made an error in the accounting entries in terms of the amount. So I'm just going to use here the sum function. I'm just going to sum all these column. I'm going to sum all of these. Okay, so yeah, it's this amount and the sum this side. Okay, means here in terms of debit and credit, everything is okay. In terms of the ledger, let me just use it here. Let me just sum it here, or let me just put sum. So from here, I'm going to talk about the debit side, and then I'm going to talk about the credit side. You see, there is a difference at the level of amounts that we will have to check on it. So in our next video, we are going to see how to create a ledger account that can interrogate specific accounts in the journal, because this one is summarizing everything and it becomes difficult for us to see all the details of every transaction or of every account in terms of its movements. So in our next video, we will then see how to create another detailed ledger which will interrogate individual accounts automatically from the journal. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you get up to this level with no problem. If you have any question, any difficulties, just write to us in the description and get to you in the next video.